Hi, I'm Jacques. I'm a South African living in Germany, and I was recently diagnosed with ALS. As I did my research on the internet, I saw that there's loads of questions out there in terms of the diagnostic process. That's why I decided I would do this video and tell my story, so that hopefully people could find some help and benefit from it. I am not a healthcare professional, so please, in all circumstances, always consult with your team of healthcare professionals before you make a choice that is right for you. The diagnostic process was probably one of the most frustrating processes that I went through in my life. This is through no fault of the physicians, but it's because there's no definitive test for ALS. Hence, the neurologists and the doctors would go through a variety of tests to eliminate diseases that mimic the ALS symptoms. The diagnostic process usually lasts anything from 1 to 2 years, depending on the phase of the disease as well as the speciality of the healthcare professionals. My own process from start to where I got my diagnosis was a period of 7 years. So let me start at the beginning. So my mom passed away from ALS in 1997, and because you were part of her process, you started to see and experience what the disease does to the human body. So you know what to look out for. So about 15 years, I started with muscle tremors, which was very much part of my mom's disease. And I saw that in her, especially in the beginning of her disease. I then started to get very worried, and I took some supplements like magnesium, but none of this really helped. Later on, a few years later, I then started to get very, very severe muscle cramps. So much so I would wake up in the middle of the night with these cramps, and it would take me about half an hour to get the muscle relaxed before I could fall asleep again. Later on, the weakness started. I used to go to the gym quite regularly, so I was not very muscular, but I was fairly strong. And over time, I then got to a point where I didn't have the strength that I used to have, and for example, I could barely manage 10 push-ups. That is then when I decided to go and see a doctor. I told her about my family history, I told her about my fears, I told her about the things that I'm experiencing, and then she started embarking on the diagnostic process. She did a whole barrage of about 40 different blood tests. I think I donated so much blood or gave so much blood, it would make a vampire envious. And in the end, when my results came back, all 5 pages, everything was right as it was supposed to be, except for one thing, my creatine kinase. That was about 3 times the maximum acceptable level. Now, what creatine kinase is when your muscle breaks down, this is released into the bloodstream. So what she said is because I was gymming so much that it could just be as a natural part of the gym process that my muscles would break down, but they would recover again and grow. But to alleviate my fears, she then gave me a reference to go see a neurologist. So then I went to see the neurologist. So the neurologist went through all of the tests that he could do in his rooms, which in the beginning would be that they would ask you about your history, they would ask you about your general health. He would then do various tests to test your large and your small motor neurons in terms of their responsiveness and whether your fine motor neuron or your motor skills was still there. He also then tested the muscle responses by looking at your reflexes and seeing if there's any over reflexes of the muscles. But from that, he couldn't determine that there was anything wrong. He then sent me for an electromyogram, which is a test where they insert needles and they look at the muscle's responses to the electrical signals. So in this, the test actually sounds a lot worse than what it is. Yes, it's uncomfortable because they stick needles in you, but it sounds worse than what it actually is. What they then found was that I have a little dead spot under my left foot, but nothing to be concerned about. So I was none the wiser again. So now what? On the one hand, you don't want the ALS diagnosis, but on the other hand, living with uncertainty is even worse in some cases. So during this time, my aunt also developed some muscle weakness. So that's then when my family started to put two and two together, because my great-grandmother had muscle weakness. My grandmother was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy. My aunt then displayed these symptoms, and she was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy. And then they decided, but there must be something in our family that causes all of these neurological diseases. We then convinced my aunt, and she went for a whole panel of gene tests to look at the gene panel for ALS. And it was then discovered that she had the VCP mutation. The rest of the family then also went for their gene tests, and I came back that I also had the VCP mutation. So now that I had something definitive, this gave me the loose thread that I could then pull to unravel this mystery of what was wrong with me. So that was in 2018. So over time, I then started to develop other symptoms, such as just stubbing my toe when I would be walking. When I was tired, I would not be able to pronounce words properly, and so on. So in this year, 2020, I then decided to go see a neurologist again. So then, armed with a gene test, as well as doing an EMG again and doing the other test that she would do in the surgery, that then gave me the diagnosis. So in my case, because of the gene, which gave you something definitive, as well as the clinical tests, I'm fairly certain that this diagnosis is correct. But what about second opinions? The ALS Association actually recommends that you go for a second opinion. Why is that? Because 15% of people get false positives, where it's actually a different disease, but they get diagnosed with ALS. In the same way, the reverse is true, where 40% of people get diagnosed with something else, like my mother, like my aunt, and then only later is diagnosed with ALS. So if it's right for you and you feel that you want to do it, always go for a second opinion. My advice would be go for a second opinion with a neurologist that actually specializes in ALS or these type of neurological disorders. So what now? There's no curative treatment for ALS. What I did is I made some changes to my life. I'm living more healthy, I eat more healthy, I do things like yoga, I manage my stress levels, all to try and prolong the progression of the disease as much as possible. So I will be discussing more about these things that I do on a daily basis to help me manage the disease and improve my health. And if you are interested, please like, also subscribe, and leave any comments in the box below on any topic that you would like me to cover. Until then, never give up, stay positive, manage your stress levels, laugh a lot, and love even more. Bye-bye.